Awesome. Hello. Okay, so welcome to Results Washington's Reflection Series. This is a video interview series where we highlight continuous improvement projects that are being executed by agencies all across the state. And we're spotlighting individual subject matter experts of these projects as they share their perspective and their up close and personal experience on the effort, while also highlighting their achievements, barriers, and of course, lessons learned throughout the project. My name is Talia Mazzara. I'm a senior performance advisor with Results Washington. And today I am joined by Jeremy Walker with the Washington State Department of Commerce. How are you doing, Jeremy?
I'm good. Thanks, Talia.
Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge that Jeremy is so awesome to not just grace us with his presence once, but twice, as he was also previously a presenter at our monthly enterprise-wide Lean and Continuous Improvement COP. He spoke on using the Lean DMADV model in equity analysis and project implementation. That was a very great presentation with a wonderful Q&A exchange between Jeremy and the community. We record all our sessions, so if you want to take a look at that, you can go to results.wa.gov, click on Improving Government, and then Continuous Improvement Community of Practice, and you'll see that he was one of our February 2024 presenters. So thank you so much for being with us again. I want to kick us off and see if you can tell us a bit about yourself, your position, and just a little about what the Department of Commerce is responsible for.
Sure. So my name is Jeremy Walker. I use he, him pronouns, and I work at the Office of Equity and Belonging. It's an internal service to the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce administers nearly $9 billion dollars in funding now to communities. That's a combination of state and federal funding. So we do everything from capital programs where we'll actually fund things like community facilities to housing to services for people who are most vulnerable in our state. So we have a lot of different things that we do here at the Department of Commerce. And that's something that I really enjoyed when I first came to commerce was I was thinking, wow, we're really just focused on business and different industries. But what I didn't realize coming in was just how focused we were on strengthening all communities, which is our mission here at Commerce.
That's wonderful. Thank you for clearing that up because I know that not everyone knows what commerce is responsible for. And that is funny because that is a common misconception that it just deals with businesses. So that's really awesome to hear all the great work you're doing in many different areas. So, as you know, we're here to talk about projects. Are there any particular projects you want to share about? And if so, maybe start with its name and the problem you were trying to solve. And why was this issue important to address?
Yeah. So my first job when I came here to Commerce, I was a senior project management analyst, and I got the privilege to work on a project that looked at equitable outcomes and equitable notification of grant opportunities within our Building Communities Fund. That program was really focused on building capital resources for communities. So things like community centers, food banks,
Mm.
office spaces where services could be delivered for nonprofits to communities. And it's really cool because if I get on the link, since I live on the west side of the state, I can literally take the link and I'm like, that project we funded, that building we funded, that's another community that we funded. So you can really see it and feel it and experience it. But one of the things that that team really found was we weren't really getting a diverse set of applications from organizations that
Mm.
are really boots on the ground, those kinds of aunties and uncle type organizations that are really trying to make change at the most grassroots level.
Mm.
And so their question to me was, how do we do a better job of notifying these organizations that these grant funding exists? And then what kind of assistance do they need in order to be successful in applying? So we're not talking about, making it so easy that they always get it, right? It's more about how do we make that equitable. So we needed to identify who those organizations were. So long story short, the presentation that I gave in February was using a Lean Six Sigma process called DMADV, DMADV, as you
Mhm.
talked about. And in that work, we were able to identify over 1,200 likely buy-in for organizations across
Wow.
our, and we were able to increase the communication by 300% at the end of that project. So that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I do remember when you gave that presentation, just hearing like the huge difference after that project from where you started. And again, I'm just putting that plug for folks who don't know about that presentation. Go back and take a look at that because Jeremy shared some great slides to give some good visuals on how that work was done and how that model really helped do that work. I just have a follow-up question. So you talked about the problem you were trying to solve and why it was important to address, but why now? Like, was there that talk at the table of, okay, we need to get this going now?
Yeah, and I think that this is a larger conversation that we're seeing across the state. Even
Mhm,
when I'm attending the lean conferences through Results Washington, there's a really big focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
mhm,
And I know that that's something that, even federally is commonly under attack and under scrutiny. And it's something that's really important. The way I think about it in lean is it's about efficiently serving everybody.
mhm,
That's what it is. And so those two things are not, rubbing up against one another or in conflict. They work in parallel and
mhm,
they fit together very, very well. So in the presentation that I gave, I talked about how lean as a skilled lean practitioner, it's really an adapter to a lot of the equity frameworks that are coming out today, whether that be through environmental justice, through HEAL, which is now a legislated requirement for many significant agency actions,
mhm,
or it's one of those that we're looking in terms of targeted universalism, which is another approach that's very similar that gets us into things like results-based accountability and all of these other things. So whether you're needing lean for simple project management or you're looking for equitable program outcomes, lean is there to really help support that work. And I think that's what makes a difference between someone who's just kind of cookie cutter following the steps to
mhm.
get to the end and someone who's really focused on those outcomes that are going to have a significant difference for communities.
Absolutely. So much more mindfulness and intentionality going into this work. You talked about, a bit about how you solved the problem, but if you want to go more into the specifics of that and what improvements or waste reductions did you see while doing this work?
Yeah, some of the things were just simple efficiencies. And these efficiencies aren't just experienced by communities, they're experienced by staff as
Yeah.
well. So, one of the things that I try to say is diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a positive benefit for not only communities, but for our own staff. And in that way, a lot of times we can take a look at our own application processes.
Hmm.
So when we're looking at these applications, we're seeing like, are there redundant questions? Uh, excuse me, another one is looking at, are we communicating what we think we're communicating? And
Hmm.
I think that's really challenging, especially when we start to think about the different communities that we serve and the languages that might be used out there, right? Not everybody knows English. And so by translating a lot of our notifications into other languages, it gives a heads up to those communities that often get overlooked simply because we're not even speaking in the same language.
Hmm.
So these are just a few of the many things. Another one was there's a lot of anxiety from staff going into communities and talking with communities.
Hmm.
Nobody likes getting yelled at. Nobody likes being told that they're not doing a good job. And I think by going ahead and having this approach to say, we're doing this very methodically and we're doing it in a way that's where we're listening. One of the things we were able to identify was how can we collect this data from you in a ethical way
Hmm.
that is culturally competent. And I think that's another thing that was really significant in our learning was it's going to look a little different depending on the communities that we're going to. And we need to be conscious of what we're needing to collect and why. And I think that why at the end of the day is like, what decisions are we going to be making from a result of collecting this information? And that really puts the onus back on managers and executive directors to be, is this something that would just be a curiosity for you? Or is this something that is essential in driving a major decision? And I think that's really where the difference was, is like, what is the information that we need to collect that would really drive a major decision? And in this case, it was really looking geographically and demographically across the state where all these organizations were. So we were able to find, like, while we knew we needed to get off the I-5 corridor, we
Hmm.
didn't necessarily know where those areas were. So when we did overlaps with like the health disparities map, and we did uh, a layer of our different buy and for organizations, we were able to see, oh, this is where it correlates very well. We need to be heading out to Yakima. We need to be heading out into, East Vancouver. We need to be heading out into these very distinct areas where we can have face-to-face conversations. And it was helpful because at the end of the day, we're all human. We don't have the capacity to make it everywhere in the
Hmm.
state. And so it really allowed us to say, where can we go in person
Hmm.
that we haven't been before, where we need to build that trust? And where can we offer this virtually and just do a better job of notifying statewide? And that balance really helped us. And so we were able to actually double the number of buy and for organizations that we were able to award at the end of the day and still get everybody who wasn't even buying for those services and funding as well.
That is huge. Oh my gosh, such great work. And so you already answered, how this work created more equitable outcomes for Washingtonians and the state employees, how the lean and the efficiencies affected the employees. Just out of curiosity, I mean, this, like you said, this is such humane work. And so I'm thinking of you all being in the room and just you with your leadership and the folks working on this, just talking about the ways to do this. Again, going rogue with a follow-up question, but just for that personal experience effect, what was the vibe and the energy in that room? It sounds like you have such supportive leadership, and that's very encouraging.
Yeah, I really have to give credit to two fantastic women leaders. One is Addie Craig, the other is Alice Sila.
Mm.
And between them, I really, really got a sense of this is the work that we're supposed to be doing. It got hard sometimes.
Yeah.
We had staff who are juggling many different responsibilities and they're trying to get work done, which we face all the time at the state. And it was really helpful to have leadership that said, this is a priority. I really need you to meet with Jeremy or to meet with this community to do these things. And, staff were also incredibly supportive, right? Just
Excuse
in making sure that they were able to follow up with the actions and the recommendations that were made. So I think the one thing that when we think about just the energy in the room, it really came from a sense of people also being from communities, right?
me.
Eddie Craig in particular, somebody who has so many connections with communities and really understands that this was a need. Without that leadership, it just never would have happened. And I really do have to credit her with that.
That is wonderful. Thank you for that. So, what's the next step in your project or your agency's plan?
Yeah, so a couple different things that have occurred since then is since I gave the presentation, I've actually presented the project again to the Department of Transportation. I've
Wonderful.
also given a couple of presentations at other agencies in buy and for work. And we've had some legislation here at Commerce to do more buy and for work. And our recommendation as of right now is to really utilize this tool and identifying buy and for organizations as a means of notification, but not for determining grant application. So what that means is that we're going to really do a better job of notifying different organizations of the possibility for getting funds, but not
Mm,
necessarily doing set asides.
mm.
Uh, and there's challenges around that, right? And not to get too much into that. But I think the other piece is that this integration of lean. right? This integration of what does lean look like when it comes to equity work and how do those complement each other? And I keep thinking about going to the Gemba. When you
Mm,
go to the Gemba, right, it means go to where the work is happening. And
yes.
at Commerce, we hear when you're going to engage with community, go to community, right? Go to where community is happening. And so going to the Gemba and going to the community are the same thing, just said in different words.
Hmm.
And that's really what we're emphasizing here at Commerce is if we're going to go ahead and go to the Gemba, we need to go to the community. If we need to figure out where the process is happening, we need to go to the staff that are working on that process to identify where things are going well and where they're not going well. And by identifying those wastes, removing a lot of those questions, a lot of those kind of, oh, it'd be nice to know, but it's not really going to affect the bottom line. By removing a lot of those things, we make our processes more efficient for ourselves and for our staff and for communities.
Outstanding. So you talked a little bit about your challenge. What would you say was the biggest challenge you faced when doing this work? And what, looking back in retrospect now, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would have been the the information overload when it
Mm.
came to our staff getting inundated with calls about the grants. We didn't actually think it was going to be so successful. Uh,
That's a
so
good problem to have,
it was a
right?
really good problem to have. But I think that's really where we're at right now. Even at Commerce is just building out more robust. I mean, we have hired more staff over the last 5 years, but uh, the fact is that we need people to be able to speak competently to communities in
Mm,
a way that is not as siloed. And so some of that work is actually integrating more of the equity frameworks like targeted universalism, where we're trying to de-silo ourselves.
mm.
So in targeted universalism, and this works with lean too, right? Lean's about breaking down silos as well. It's
Yep.
about building those swim chart lanes and everything else. So lean and targeted universalism, they're good cousins. They're going to work together pretty well. And in that work, it's all about figuring out, okay, I'm hearing from this person who needs this thing, but it's clearly not for my program. Who else at Commerce or who else at other agencies could potentially be providing services or funding to this group or person. And
Yeah.
that's really where we're at right now is trying to draw more of those networks and webs so that we can then notify people of these funds and treat them more as a whole human being instead of like, oh, you don't have that problem? You're not my problem, right?
Mm,
And I'm not
hmm.
saying that that's what we do at Commerce, but I think it's just the sheer size of the state government, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, how can anyone know everything? And I don't think that's the point, but it's really about saying, hold up, I do have power as a state employee. I am a public servant and I'm here to serve the public. So how do I do that? And it could just be simply referring them to your manager or referring them to another source where you think that they have a better shot at getting their answers. When I was doing this for the BCF equity analysis, I got so many different people coming to me saying, hey, I need housing funds. I need these funds. And I knew BCF wasn't going to fund them. But I was able to network them and connect them to program staff or to the right page on our website.
Hmm.
And the level of trust I instantly won just from that conversation was really like, oh, I can trust this person at Commerce now.
Hmm.
And that is creating less of a transactional relationship and more of a transformational relationship, which is something that we want to do here at Commerce is strengthen all communities by building transformational relationships.
Oh, yeah. And I can see it. It comes through when you're talking, your depth of knowledge, understanding, and just passion with this is really, it just shines through. And it's, I think, a huge testament to how awesome your agency is, your team, and, you're not just talking the talk of equity, y'all are walking it. And that is just great to see. And another rogue question, but, if If you could give another agency advice, right? Because you're not the Office of Equity as far as agency goes. You
Right.
have your Office of Equity within commerce, and you all are, from what it sounds like, and the work that you've shown us previously, you are really modeling that example of how an agency really is thoughtful, mindful, and intentional with this equity work. And so, do you have any, I don't know, maybe thoughts of how you can encourage another agency to go forth with this great work in the lens of equity and DEI?
Yeah, I think that one of the really great things across the state is we have a lot of really equitably minded people. We have so many across the state, too many to name right now. But the Office of Equity in particular with their pair plan is a
Yeah.
great space for learning if you're not sure where to start. Most of the larger agencies have a pair team, either fully staffed or through through some kind of process other than hiring staff like we have at Commerce.
Hmm.
There's also the HEAL teams at each of the major agencies as well. And so I would say reach out to your HEAL team. I often see the HEAL team and my team doing very similar work. Theirs is legislatively required for significant agency actions. And so there's more of a process to that. But, you know, you take a look at their community engagement guides, or you take a look at how the processes that they're doing, you take a look at the metrics that they're looking at, right? It's all very, very similar. And I think the thing that I would really stress with anyone is like start somewhere,
Hmm.
right? It's not about trying to figure out which framework you have to use or, you know, getting embattled with like, oh my gosh, you know, you're pro sci and I'm PMP and you're lean and I'm Six Sigma or
Right.
I'm lean and you're targeted universalism or you're heal, right? Or in your pair. It's not about that. It's really about seeing, hey, we've all got a piece of this puzzle and we need to come together in order to achieve a better result. And so the last thing I think would just be like letting go of ego.
Mm,
Like that is a really big part of it.
yeah.
Um, you know, and sometimes we might not even know that it's ego that's holding us back. But letting go
Mm,
of that ego of like, I have to be the best or I have to have the say. And it's like, do you really? I even catch myself doing it. I'm like, is this really important? How important is this to me? Like, do I have to say something in this moment? And so those are just some of the things that I try to do to like reel it back and let the rest of my team work on things. And I have a great team right now in the Office of Equity and Belonging, and the Office of Equity also has a really great team, and I've relied on them as well. And then also Results Washington, right? Like everybody has a piece of the puzzle, everybody has a part of the solution. So we really need to come together, let go of that ego a bit, and just start somewhere.
I love that. Let go of that ego. And then, like you said before, just get started. It's not about perfectionism, having everything in the right place, because if you wait on that, it's just never going to happen, or it's going to be an incredible delay when this work
Yeah.
needs to get done. So, such good, thank you, such good insights. Another question. So, you mentioned earlier, that there was so much work and you all didn't expect for it to work that well, and you got overburdened at the beginning with all these calls and everything. After doing this work, did your team or the, excuse me, the leadership for your team sit back and say, we need to expand our team and I think we need to hire more staff? Is that something that this work has kind of caused to where you all need to, not in a bad way, but a good way, to where you need to expand your team?
Yeah, so there definitely were legislative requests for more staffing. There was more requests for technical assistance, in particular to translation.
Mm,
And so there were actions that were taken through a regular legislative report, and that was led by our managing director in that project. I would say in other projects that I've led, you know, similar things have occurred. That said, I think the other piece with equity and engagement is oftentimes if all going to the community, we might be going to the same communities.
Hmm.
And so we need to think again about de-siloing our program outreach. We need
Yeah.
to be thinking about like how much money is it really going to take to do a really good job. So another project that I worked on was developing, and I got to give a shout out to the DCYF research team
Oh
here
yeah.
because they started this work and it's been amazing.
Hmm.
But they created a calculator that calculated community compensation based off of, location in the state. And then what I did is I added in language access. So
Mm.
calculated out the DES contracts in there. So we now have a calculator that calculates out administrative costs, calculates out community compensation and language access. And so some of these newer questions that we're just now starting to dive into is like, how much money do you really need in order to do an effective job, not only for the immediate need, but also for the follow-up? And I think that is one place where across the board, I could be doing a better job. And I think a lot of people could be doing a better job
Mm.
is like, we often hear this from communities. You came in, you did something, you got what you wanted, and then you left, and we never heard from you again.
That right
Right.
there. That's right.
So having a more comprehensive team to do this, and at Commerce we have our community engagement team,
Hmm.
and so they're a small but mighty group. And so having ways of us to work together, not necessarily just to start building out more of a team, but like how do we coordinate better, letting go some of that ego and saying, hey, come along, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's all get into a van. Let's go to that community. Let's present on our different things. Let's come back together. Let's circle around and figure out what we need to do in order to achieve the holistic approach as opposed to just the housing problem or
Yeah.
just the environmental problem or just the capital problem. Let's figure out how to work and figure out what does this community really need with community at the table.
Yeah, and that's why continuous improvement and lean, they really stress, the not just the planning and the doing, but the following up. I mean, exactly like how people can feel like such a number when you're just coming in and taking a survey and just talking for that moment to go get your work done. But how often are you following up and continuously improving to make sure that what you implemented really works several years down the line? And so that's what really creates that sense of just that impact and that appreciation, like appreciating the communities and them knowing and appreciating the agencies, right? Knowing that the agencies are really here working for Washingtonians. So
Yeah,
awesome.
and in lean lingo, that would be voice of the customer, right?
Yep.
Again, it's just different words, but
Yep.
it's stuff.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you are awesome. Your agency is awesome. Your team is awesome. And you've given a few shout outs, but are there any other shout outs you have before we take off?
Well, I would definitely like to thank you, Talia. I really appreciate your continued follow-up with me
Oh
on
yeah.
different things. I think what the team at Results Washington does is really great. I also appreciate the fact that Lean has incorporated equity and belonging into a lot of their work over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's really made, I think, the work overall a little bit easier. It's always hard, but it makes it a little bit easier. I also just think that I'm trying to go through my head. There are literally so many people. But
It's like
again,
that moment when you're accepting an award on
yeah,
stage.
yeah, it's just one of those things where I think like there are so many people, but um, yeah, I really think if you reach out to your equity team or your DEI team, pair team, heal team, whatever team that you can think of, and just say, hey, I want to start somewhere, it's a great place. And always do those self-reflections, that internalization. And I think that's something that Lillian Faraz always reminds me, as well as uh, uh, a lot of the people on my team here at Commerce. They're always like, do that internal work to make sure that you're having that intentional outcome. Because if you're not questioning your internal intentions, then you're probably going to have outcomes that are different from what you're intending.
I love that. And that reminds me of something that I've said before when I was involved in some DEI teams back at HCA is, a motto was it's about, it's not about behavior modification, but heart transformation. And if you're not really in it and figuring out and ensuring that your motivation is right, right? You're not just trying to get work done, but you're really trying to make it better for the recipients of the work and just overall, then it's not going to last. So I really love that sentiment. And I thank you so much for your insight. You really are a great spokesperson for this work, Jeremy. And I know your agency is so happy to have you. I'm so thankful to have worked with you on these last few things of you coming to results and presenting. I love hearing about it. And yeah, we just appreciate everything that you're doing. So you heard it, folks. The Department of Commerce is making great strides in intentionality when it comes to incorporating a lean and inclusive and equitable lens to the multiple bodies of work that they're doing. So we can't thank you enough, Jeremy. And I do believe you are due for a vacation.
Yes, yeah.
Well deserved. All
Thank
right.
you.
I hope
Oh,
you have
one
so much fun.
shout out. I really want to thank Marissa Van Hooser, who's our Chief of Equity and Belonging here at Commerce.
Yes.
And she oversees our Equity and Operations division. And then also Kyle Gitchell, who's my supervisor. Between the two of them, they've really taught me a lot around lean and also equity work. So yeah, definitely without their support, many of the projects I would have been working on would not have actually occurred.
Yeah, and it shines through. And I also want to say, not only is this inspiring for other agencies to start doing this work, but I feel like it's also inspiring for people who don't yet work with the state to possibly want to come work with you all, and really just, again, see the testament and the testimony to what you all believe in and that you're actually walking it out. So, thank you for being such a great representation of your agency and Washington State employees all over. Always love talking with you, Jeremy. So, thank you for joining us. And until next time, folks, see ya.